Improving public education is one of the Chamber's top priorities. And this speaker series is one way the Chamber engages you to speak with some of the leaders who are making the difference in our educational system here in Nashville, Tennessee. Today, we're here to learn from Teach for America, and so it is my pleasure to introduce the speaker who is responsible for bringing Teach for America to Nashville, Mayor Carl Dean.
Thank you, Sam, and it's great to be here with you all today. Earlier today, I had the privilege of hearing Stephen Farr talk about the critical elements of effective teaching and their impact in terms of closing the gap, the achievement gap. These identified areas are ones that are not new to the conversation, but collectively it is clear they are a powerful approach when we talk about what defines teacher effectiveness. So I am pleased that we were able to have him here to share with us these principles. You know, it was roughly about 2.5 years ago that I traveled to New York City to meet with Wendy Kopp, the founder and CEO of Teach for America. I went up there having learned about Teach for America, knowing that I wanted to bring Teach for America to our city, and met with Ms. Kopp and told her that she needed to have Teach for America down in Nashville. She told me she was aware that Nashville was a city, and that we were not on the waiting list, and that there was a waiting list, and that it would be 4 or 5 years before they could come to Nashville. I then told her that I'm mayor for 4 years, so that doesn't do much for me. And we went through a process where I basically sent her emails and phone calls kind of whining and encouraging her to look at Nashville. And basically she said, finally, if you can raise the money to pay for Teach for America for 3 years, you know, and get a couple $1 million in the next month or so, will come. And I presented that challenge to the business community and the philanthropic community of Nashville, and we raised $2 million in about 2 weeks. And Teach for America is here and doing very, very well. Currently, we have about 110 committed, idealistic Teach for America teachers in our school district, and each one is having an impact. When Teach for America measures the success of its teachers, it looks at a variety of factors. It looks at retention, core member satisfaction, and most importantly, teacher effectiveness within the classroom. For Nashville, in the area of retention, 100% of our first-year core members or teachers return to teach this current academic year. That's a great achievement. In terms of satisfaction, according to TFA's internal metrics, Nashville is one of their top 5 regions in terms of overall satisfaction with the school district and the level of local and community support that Teach for America teachers receive. In terms of effectiveness, last week the Tennessee Higher Education Commission released the 2010 report card on the effectiveness of teacher training programs. This report looked at all teacher certifying or other teacher preparation programs in Tennessee, and there are 41 altogether, and scored how well their graduates were performing in the classroom. They compared each program's graduates based on TVAS scores as well as other indicators. Compared to the mean scores for all 41 institutions, TVA Tennessee, Teach for America Tennessee, showed a statistically significant positive difference with its beginning teachers and veteran teachers in every evaluated subject, which included math, reading language arts, science, and social studies. The report also showed that a significant percentage of them scored in the 80th percentile or above in these same subject areas compared with all teachers statewide. All of this is to say is that Teach for America is having the impact we hoped it would in our schools and with our students. I want to now introduce Stephen Farr, who serves as the Chief Knowledge Officer for Teach for America. It's a great title, Chief Knowledge Officer. He first joined Teach for America in 1993 as a core member teaching high school English and English as a second language in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. He actually, as we were talking today at lunch, he actually received his letter of admission to Teach for America the same day he received his letter of admission to Yale Law School. So he deferred his law school admission for 2 years and did Teach for America, and then went to Yale and got a law degree. which is always a good thing to have, I believe. After practicing and then teaching law, Stephen rejoined TFA in 2001 as Vice President of Training and Support. Please join me in welcoming Stephen to Nashville.
I want to start with a thank you for having me here. Never been to Nashville before. And in this 24 hours, the mayor was reading out some sort of the numbers that I think so correlate with what I've experienced here, which is a community aligned around changing education for children in low-income communities in a way that honestly I don't see and feel very often. And I just appreciate very, very much all that's happening in the community of Nashville, and I'm honored to be here to talk to you about some of what we're learning and some of what we're struggling with. As the mayor said, I'm Chief Knowledge Officer, which really means I've got the best job in the world. I get a call when there's a teacher in our Corps who is having a life-changing impact on his or her students. And I get to go and study what is that teacher doing differently from other teachers so that we can understand how we can move all of us to the point that those most successful teachers are. And what I'd love to do in a few minutes is just take you a little bit behind the curtain on those studies and share some of what we've been learning. But I do feel like, honestly, I feel like I owe it to my students from the Rio Grande Valley to start with some hard truths about the state of our nation in terms of education equity. In the United States, by 4th grade, children who are in the lowest quartile socioeconomically, which is overrepresented by African American children and Latino children, children in the lowest quartile socioeconomically are already on average between 2 and 3 years behind wealthier kids in the suburbs. That's by the 4th grade. In the United States, African American and Latino graduates in the lowest quartile socioeconomically, graduates of high school are reading on average like middle income 8th graders. I have been to a high school where there were 1,200 freshmen and 200 seniors cross the stage at the end of the year. We all watch the news and we all hear all of the challenges our nation has. I know I'm preaching to the choir in this room because you're here, but I can't help but think every one of those challenges. I'm talking national security, we're talking about the economy. All of them depend on what happened to those 1,000 kids that disappeared between their freshman year and their senior year. The lost potential that we have in this nation by not fulfilling our ideals of being a land of equality and freedom, by the fact that if of all the data points we have about predicting who will go to college, you know what is most predictive? Zip code. This is a travesty. And Teach for America is a group of people, much like most of you in this room, I assume, who believe that that is an injustice. It is one of the greatest injustices in our country, and we have to solve it. At Teach for America, we have a two-pronged theory of change here. I think most people, when I sit next to someone on the bus and they hear Teach for America, they think, oh yeah, that's the program that puts young teachers usually in classrooms in low-income communities. And that's absolutely right. Part one of our theory of change is we are out aggressively recruiting on 400-something campuses across the country, trying to convince the top graduates of those universities to commit 2 years to teach in a low-income community on the theory that we can, with exceptional selection and training, we can close the achievement gap for our students even in the first and second year. We have to get people doing that. But and that, by the way, is going pretty well. Last year we had 46,000 people apply to Teach for America. We only selected about 1 in 10. It is harder to get a job at Teach for America these days than it is at Goldman Sachs. I'm very proud of that. We also got a call from Goldman Sachs not long ago that said, "You're stealing all our people." I'm very proud of that, too. Our recruitment team is not putting posters on trees. They have connections on campuses, and they are saying, who are the student leaders that are having an impact? And they're calling those people up out of the blue, saying, will you meet me at Starbucks? Just 15 minutes. We just want to talk. What are you doing? And then we tell them about this problem. And whatever it is they say they want to do, we say, you'll be better at that if you join us first. That's I think what a lot of people know about Teach for America. But there's a second half to this mission, and that is we are placing bets on who will be leaders in this society 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and ensuring that we have leaders in every sector of society who have had the transformational experience of teaching successfully in a low-income community. Now that we are almost 20 years old, we're starting to see this. We have hundreds and hundreds of school principals out there. We have school board members. There's some of you are probably familiar with the KIPP schools, which by just about any measure are some of the most successful schools in low-income communities across the country, and there are perhaps 100. Those were started by two of our alumni in Houston who worked so hard with their kids, changed their kids' lives, and decided we've got to build a school and keep this going. The YES schools, we've got elected officials. There's a state senator in Colorado named Michael Johnston who taught in the Mississippi Delta, and guess what his issue is on the Hill in Colorado? It is education. I like to think that for me, that I can sort of testify to the transformational impact that this experience has on people. I did leave teaching to go to law school, and that was a very difficult decision, and frankly, I was miserable for my first year of law school. Until I went back and started studying education equity. And I realized there are lots of policy and legal issues that need to be taken up on the law side, and that's what I was doing. That experience with my students changed the course of my life because I came away believing, seeing firsthand, that children in low-income communities have all of the potential that I had, but none of the opportunities that I had. And this dual theory of change is what Teach for America is doing. We are in the leader production business. We want to create classroom leaders, but also school leaders and political leaders and innovators who know that success is possible. I give that background to set up my part of the equation of the work here. Maybe this is obvious. Both halves of our theory of change depend on our teachers being dramatically effective, right? If we have teachers come in and they're good teachers, but kids are growing about a year's worth of academic growth in a single calendar year, we are perpetuating the gap that students showed up with. That's not enough. We have to be great. We have to be closing the gap right now. And if our teachers are not successful, we are not creating leaders who are lifelong advocates for change. Because what will happen, if I go into a classroom and I work hard and I'm not successful, I may take the wrong lessons from that, right? I may think, oh, the world's right, those kids can't learn. We have to understand what is effective teaching in this context, and we have to get better. I'm saying this as an organization, but also as a nation, at understanding how to prepare teachers to change kids' lives. And here's the exciting part. This is happening. In 10 years, over 10 years, I have been in hundreds of classrooms where children are showing up 2-3 years behind and leaving at the end of the year caught up. Where children are showing up well on their way to remedial math in high school and probably to drop out, and yet all of the kids from this classroom are headed into advanced placement math in high school. The question that we have before us that we have to answer is what is different about those classrooms from other classrooms? And that's the studies that we have been taking up. As you can imagine, I know everyone in the room understands just how messy assessments are in education. Hope you also understand how much better they've gotten in a decade, but it is still a mess. We have limited confidence that they're rigorous enough. These superficial standardized tests are frustrating in a lot of ways. On the other hand, if they are so superficial, the fact that our kids as teachers can't pass them is a problem. This should be a baseline, not a ceiling. We should be able to do this. And when we look across our core and we look at the data coming from our teachers, we see a few patterns. One, and this is what external studies of our teachers have shown, as the mayor was describing some of that, our teachers are doing pretty well as compared to most groups of teachers that you can imagine on average. I also, let's be honest, we have teachers who are struggling, right? This is first and second year of teaching, and we have teachers that are not fulfilling our mission. At the same time, we have a growing fraction of teachers who are not just getting a year's worth of growth out of students, but 2, 3, on assessments we actually believe in. There was a teacher in North Carolina, which has some pretty rigorous assessments, by the way, on literacy. 3.3 years of growth. Kids are showing up at the door as fourth graders, reading like first graders, and by the end of the year, they were back on track. That is a life-changing experience for a child. So what we've been able to do is dive in and study those teachers. What I'd like to do right now is just give a high-altitude review of what some of the things are that we've been learning. Let me start with a story. I started to tell this story earlier today, but I think it's easier just to take you with me to one of these classes. This is in Atlanta. What I heard was there's this teacher at this Atlanta high school who's having an incredible impact on his kids. Wendy Kopp, our founder, and I went to visit Maurice Thomas. The high school was not a warm and welcoming learning environment, I will say. Walking to his class did not inspire me to think this is where children are learning. When we got to his class, however, we opened the door, and all the students were sitting around one particular student who was leading a discussion of what would Dr. King's letter from Birmingham jail look like if it had been written today. And the students had the primary sources in their hand, and they had the essays that they had written, and they were arguing about this with such intensity that they had no idea we walked in the room. That's a pretty good sign. And when we sat at the back of the room, we looked up on the wall, and there were 2 signs on the wall. One said, "Our big goal." Those of you who are core members will, this will echo in your mind. Our big goal is that 100% of us will pass the Georgia State Standards for U.S. history. And there was another sign that said, "Our bigger goal is that every single one of us will be accepted to a university. The lucky ones to Wisconsin," it said. This is the first pattern that we see in dramatically effective classrooms. Every time we find a classroom where kids are being put on a different life path, there is a teacher who at the beginning of the year is saying, by the end of the year, my students will be here. You know what else? There's also someone around that teacher saying, "You're nuts. There's no way." These teachers are making ambitious, audacious goals. And why are they doing that? Because setting the goal makes it happen. Setting the goal creates urgency in the classroom and alignment of actions and focus. And so we grab Maurice and say, "I see that goal up there. Tell us about that." And he said, "When we decided that every one of my kids was going to college, it changed everything. Absolutely everything. I realized we're sitting in here practicing bubble-in tests, but there's no bubble-in tests in college. I have to teach with primary sources. I have to teach writing because my kids are not ready to write. I have to teach them how to have small group discussions like college." When I said we're going to college, I realized, wait a second. My kids are behind, and every single one of them has been automatically put into ROTC. And what I heard was they're just watching videos and playing cards in ROTC. So I convinced the principal to change the schedule, and we doubled up on English and math so that we could catch up. I realized my kids, they didn't know what the SAT was and the ACT is, so I have SAT training. I think ACT training is before school, SAT training is after school. I realized my kids' parents, they don't understand how to navigate this financial aid. They didn't go to college. So Maurice has worked with a group, they donate donuts. The parents show up on Friday morning for donuts. It's called town meeting. The parents bring their forms, and he helps them get through that. He said, "We live in Atlanta. There are so many great higher education institutions here, and not a one of my students has ever been on the campus of a single one of them. So I take boys to a campus one month and girls to a campus the next month. And we've been to 4 different schools. So we say, 'Maurice, how's that going?' And he pulls out this folded sheet of paper. And he shows me his 55, he was teaching juniors, so his kids from last year are now seniors, and he's still following them. His 55 kids from last year, all of their names, where they want to apply, SAT or ACT. And he says, look at this, 52 of my 55 students have their acceptances to a university. Later, I got an email from Maurice that says, we did it. Every single one of my kids is accepted to college. But, you know, I'm worried about a couple of things. One, the kids in the suburbs, they have choices. I feel like I set the goal too low. I want every kid to have a choice about where they go to college. I want them to earn the choice. So we're making sure that every kid has more than one option. And I'm worried about them succeeding there. They're behind, and we've gotten through this hoop, but this is going to be hard. So I don't know what I'm doing yet next year, but I'm going to stay in Atlanta. This is not where Maurice was from, by the way. I'm going to stay in Atlanta because I am going to be here to be sure that my kids can make it. This is a teacher who has had a life-changing impact on his students. And the first of these patterns that we see, and the first of these patterns, this big goal setting, is in every one of these classrooms, this is the pattern that we see. And you notice this is called teaching as leadership for a reason. When you think about a successful leader in any context, that leader is setting ambitious goals that are driving the work. We landed on the moon as a nation because President Kennedy said, within 10 years we will land on the moon. Because he said that, that created the energy and the urgency and the focus. On the other hand, some of our moderately effective teachers, what we often hear is, well, I really want my kids to learn as much as they can every day. And that actually sounds pretty noble to me. On the other hand, can you imagine landing on the moon if we said, we want to do as much as we can to get to the point of landing on the moon every day? The inspiration and urgency that comes from the big goals drives everything for our most effective teachers like Maurice. The second pattern, I promise I won't tell millions of stories, but as I was saying earlier, this is my favorite. The second pattern we call investing students in their families. I was asked to come take a look at a teacher in Houston. Her name was Sarah Kottner. All I knew about this class was, on the one hand, these fifth graders are all on free and reduced lunch, right? That's proxy for they're from low-income families. They were all learning English as a second language. They were all at least 3 years behind in reading and writing. And yet, on the Texas data we were getting in the early 2000s, these kids in this fifth grade class were outperforming Spring Branch in Houston, which is a very wealthy neighborhood outside of Houston. So we go to see what's going on. I sneak into this classroom. Sarah's teaching. The first thing I notice is it's as if someone's holding down the fast forward on their TiVo. Like everyone's in a hurry, and I'm a good scientist, and right now maybe you just have to hurry, But it turns out there's more to it than that. I'm watching as the principal comes over the announcements and says, Ms. Kottner, would you please send Johnny to the office? And I watched as kids around Johnny leaned in and said, oh man, we're so sorry. Hurry back. We'll tell you what you missed. And I sat there thinking, most people would not believe what I just saw. I just saw kids in a classroom that demographically, most people would say, oh, they're a lost cause. But these kids were worried about their colleague missing some learning time. And then, this is the highlight of my professional career, I crouched down next to this poor fifth grade girl. I'm trying not to freak her out. She doesn't know who I am. I'm sitting there, and I say, they're doing some independent work. And I ask her, can you tell me a little bit about what you're doing? What are you learning in this class? And she said, not right now. I'm kind of busy. And I thought, this is a true story. My mother lived 3 hours away, and I went and got her and brought her back to this classroom. She's in a school of ed there. Most people would not believe that here is a room of kids who demographically, people would say are a lost cause, and yet they are driving their learning, and they are learning so much, and they are outperforming kids in the suburbs. So we grab Sarah and we say, I want everything. I want your lesson plans. I want your transcript from college. I want to know everything that made you into this teacher. I want your emails home. And she said, fine, I'll give you all that, or I could just tell you. I To this day, I thank her for that. And then she went after me, actually. She said, "You teach for America people. You keep telling us we have to get our classroom management figured out, and you're right. I've got to have rules and consequences. I've got to be able to manage the class. And you keep putting all this energy and saying you've got to get all these instructional strategies figured out. You're right. I do. But let me tell you something. My kids walked in my door believing that there are just two kinds of kids in the world, smart kids and dumb kids, and that there is no connection between hard work and becoming smart. That's what they had learned in their experience. So what you're not seeing, Stephen, is I have spent 3 months changing how my students think about the correlation between hard work and success. My kids now believe that intelligence is malleable, not fixed, to use the researchers' term. This was a moment of enlightenment, for me at least. There's researchers who've been saying all of this, and I wasn't listening. Our most effective teachers, the ones that are having the dramatic impact on these kids, are working on their mindsets, because children in low-income communities who have, maybe they have tried hard and failed, they have rationalized that failure as, well, that's just the way it is. It's okay because I'm not smart, so I can't do that. These teachers change that mindset, and there's reason the chapter 2 of this book is very long is there's a bunch of ways people do that, and if people have questions we can talk about that, but there are specific things that we see, right? These teachers are making progress tangible to a kid. If I'm in first grade and I'm struggling to learn to read, it can be a long time that I'm struggling, that I don't feel progress. But in these classrooms, there's a little ladybug on the wall, and for the words per minute the kid's reading, he's getting to move it up the wall a little bit, and he's seeing some of his progress. And that is enough to make the kid realize, oh, the more I practice, the more my ladybug goes up the wall. Frankly, I'm the same way as an adult, right? I want to see that there are tangible evidence. There's a bunch of strategies there. The third of these patterns that we see is, we call this planning purposefully. This is basically backwards planning. Our most effective teachers always start everything they're doing by thinking, what do I want the end to look like? And they plan backwards. And this happens from the micro to the macro. I actually was with a teacher once. This was like first grade. She only had 22 kids, but she was saying, okay, I'm going to get 22 kids to the bathroom and back in 7 minutes, and it's going to be a learning experience. She had created this mini vision of this moment and planned backwards from it. And you know what she did? Her kids, they had sight words on cards, and the kids were lining up, and they were all excited in a whisper, and you had to say the sight word before you got to go in the bathroom. And the kids going here, and they boom, 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 boom. There was not a minute of learning wasted, but she backwards planned even that micro. And then in the macro, these are teachers just like the big goal, the unit plans. They're thinking, at the end of the day, what do I want my teachers to be able to tell me? One more story that I guess I'm not sure anyone else thinks it's funny, but I do. There's a teacher named Emma Doggett. She was in the Rio Grande Valley. She was teaching junior high social studies, and her objective was students will be able to compare and contrast sort of the military strategies between the American revolutionaries and the British Army during the Revolution. She, like a lot of novice teachers, the first question that came to her mind is, okay, if that's my objective, what's really going to engage my kids? How can I really get at that objective? And she came up with this brilliant idea. She's going to take the kids to the gym, and she's going to give them those red dodgeballs, and she's going to put some in rows and tell them they can't move, and let the others run anywhere they want. And she's going to let them peg each other, and they're going to see how different the strategies are when you play dodgeball. This is going to be so fun. She did it. It was great. What she showed me was the essays she got back from kids, the essay answers when she said, compare and contrast the techniques. And guess what several students said? British people can't move. And the reason she brought that up was she said, that happened because I thought engagement first. If I had been thinking, here's what I want a child to say to me in 2 weeks when I give them this essay, I probably would have done the same thing. We still would have been in the gym, but I would have run it very differently to be sure that they were getting the point that I wanted them to get. It's just a small example of all of the ways that backwards planning plays out. The next pattern is, we call this effective execution. Our weaker teachers often say to us, great execution is having a great plan and following it. But our most effective teachers say, great execution is changing your plan while you are teaching, because the reality, while you're on your feet and teaching, is always different from what you wrote down the day before or the week before. I had a teacher say, my classroom has weather. I thought, that's a nice capture of that. There's always things shifting. I said I wouldn't tell too many more stories, but one more. This is in Oakland. I go into this classroom, and the teacher is teaching, and she's asking all of these questions, and all of the kids are sitting there intently listening, and they're going like this. You know, and I'm thinking, what is going on here? It took me way too long to figure it out, but she had taught her students American Sign Language, just the alphabet. And so she was reviewing, and when she would ask a question, the kids were in the habit of holding up the first letter of whatever they were thinking. The brilliant part was when she looked out, she asked a question, and every kid was holding up M, and that's what she knew the answer was. She did not waste another second on that question because she knew they got it. But when every kid was holding up a different letter, she dove in. What are you thinking? What are you thinking? And she explored. She was checking for understanding to understand, what do my kids get it? And adjusting as she was going. This was another one of those moments where I think, gosh, this is making a difference. We can see the effect this is having on learning. The fifth of these patterns we call continuously increasing effectiveness, which basically just means these teachers don't leave things alone. They, I call up a teacher in North Carolina, I'm going to come study you because I heard about these results. She said, oh gosh, that's fine, but I got to tell you, I'm trying a new reading workshop model in my classroom. I think it's going to be better, but I'm not sure. They are always turning knobs, seeing if they get better results, and if not, they go back. But it's like they're scientists tweaking things to see if they can get better. And then the last one, which brings me right back to the Maurice story at the beginning, we call this working relentlessly. These teachers define their role as doing what it takes to get their kids to these results. They don't define their role as, well, this is what teachers do. They just say, well, my kids are here. By the end of the year, they will be here, and I do what it takes to get them there. These are not teachers whom we hear say, well, it's not my job. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a social worker. These are teachers, frankly, that we hear say, yeah, this student gets low blood sugar at 10 o'clock and starts irritating me and everybody else. So what I did is I worked out with the cafeteria. I have an apple in my desk, and he knows he gets that apple at 10 o'clock, and we're back on track. That becomes part of my job. I think some people hear this and think, oh, that just means these people just work 24 hours a day. It is lots of work, but it's very different from working 24 hours a day because, frankly, we have some really struggling teachers working 24 hours a day. Working relentlessly is about having a locus of control and understanding what's within your control and what not, and focusing on the things that are within your control. Those 6 principles, again, we call this teaching as leadership because these are patterns that you would see in any leader in any context. There's a website. This is available to anyone. I'm not going to go through this. I just want to tell you what's happening. What we are trying to do is allow our new teachers to stand on the shoulders of those teachers that came before them that are most successful. This is a website as an example of that. If we click on, here's those 6 principles that you see that we just talked about. Behind each of those principles are the specific teacher actions that lead to dramatic student success. And for each of those actions, those of you that are core members, I'm sure you hear the word rubric and you probably, oh my gosh, he's going to talk about the rubric. We have a rubric of 28 actions against 5 levels of proficiency that we are using to help our teachers have a framework for moving toward what teachers are doing that are having the most impact. And what's on this website, if anyone wants to explore it later, is videos of every teacher action at every level of proficiency. So for checking for understanding, for example, those of you that were teachers, you probably remember this, right? When I go into a new teacher's classroom and say, I'm not sure you're really checking for understanding as you're going. Are you sure the kids are actually internalizing your objectives? And the new teacher says, oh yeah, I checked for understanding. I said, well, I didn't see. When did that happen? They said, oh, I asked them if they got it. Well, that is a classic rookie mistake, isn't it? The kids aren't the best judge of whether they've got it. You've got to see them. They've got to show you that they've got it. We've capturing videos of people doing that well and not well on 28 actions in this resource. I want to just stop there, and I'm just going to close and then take some questions. But I do want to connect this to the world at large and just to share why I'm overwhelmed, intimidated, and excited about where we are right now. I don't know if people out in the world understand, there is a revolution of success happening in low-income communities. 20 years ago, Jaime Escalante, they made a movie about him in Stand and Deliver because all of his kids passed the AP calculus test, and everyone assumed that they must have cheated because kids from South Central do not pass the AP calculus test. I think we're in a different world today, 20 years later. There are so many proof points of teachers showing that education is trumping poverty that we have an opportunity here to learn from those teachers. And there are so many schools, entire campuses, putting all of the kids on a path to college that we did not have just 10 years ago. And I feel like we're in this moment of potential enlightenment. If we do what we know it takes, what we're learning from these teachers, what we're learning from these school leaders, the question is not whether we can do this anymore. The question is whether we are going to do it. Are we going to set aside the constant search for sort of silver bullet answers and do the hard work that it takes to allow education to trump poverty? Kids from Roma did not go to college 10 years ago, very, very rarely. We started putting corps members in Roma a few, 5 or 10 a year, with the explicit role of let's talk about college. Started to hear things from Roma like, what do you mean there's advanced placement classes in Roma? This is a community of migrant workers, a very poor community. There's advanced placement classes in Roma. Many of our corps members were helping to start that. I came to this story because I heard that some teachers in Roma had decided, we're making progress on getting kids to know and believe they can go to college, but we're going to go all in. We're going to raise enough money to take all these kids to Harvard on a college trip. And they raised all this money from friends. They sold nachos on Friday nights at the football games. And they raised all this money and they took these kids to Harvard. Meanwhile, we have staff at Harvard whose job, a guy named Josh Bieber, his job is convincing Harvard students to become corps members, to join Teach for America. And he heard these students were coming and he started licking his chops. He was thinking, this is going to be the best recruitment tool I've ever had. What I'm going to do is I'm going to get all the Roma kids on stage and put the Harvard students in the audience. And I'm going to have the Roma students, these high school students, tell these Harvard students what they need to see in a highly effective teacher. And I'm going to get those Harvard students. So they're doing this. He says, okay, Harvard students, would you please introduce yourself? And they go along the line. I'm so-and-so, and I major in English, and I'm going to graduate from Harvard in 2010. I'm so-and-so, I'm pre-med, I'm graduating from Harvard in 2010. They get to the end, and the first Roma student, apparently thinking it's his turn, stands up and says, hi, I'm Alberto Alanis. I am a sophomore in Roma, and I'm going to graduate from Harvard in 2014. And the room erupts. This is the story I heard, and I thought, that's just fantastic. It's just fantastic. And recently I was working on some research for a book that's coming out by Wendy Kopp, our founder. And I thought, let's look into that. I want the details. I wasn't there, but I want to get the details of that so we can include it in the story, the effect in the community. So I wrote Josh and said, you remember that kid that stood up? I want to get the details from you. Guess who I got an email back from? Alberto Alanis at harvard.edu. He says, Stephen, I will be a junior at Harvard this coming academic year, and I'm concentrating in economics and fulfilling my pre-med requirements. With this, I plan to graduate with an MD, MBA in the future and practice medicine for a while, and then maybe go into healthcare or hospital management. Junior year should be a tough year since I'll be taking the hardest economics requirement in organic chemistry during the fall. I will just have to work extra hard, exclamation point. But either way, I digress. Harvard has been amazing, and I do not regret choosing Harvard and never will. It's given me so much. Friends, more like a family, great opportunities, knowledge, etc. In fact, because of Harvard's resources, I studied abroad in Venice, Italy this past summer and will be implementing a water purification system in an indigenous village in Bolivia probably next summer. I just love it. Well, I hope all is well with you guys. I'd love to set up a meeting if possible once I get back to Boston. Best, Alberto. P.S. I'm undecided on whether I should take time off after graduating from Harvard and between Harvard and med school, but if I do, I'm trying to decide whether to work in a lab or join Teach for America. A family in Roma is going to have a Harvard-educated doctor. This is teachers having a transformational experience on their students. Zach Blattner, the teacher that took him to Harvard, heard Alberto say, I will graduate from Harvard in 2014, and Zach believed him and helped make it happen. And I've been carrying this around sort of in awe and inspiration at the power of teachers to trump poverty with education. I actually, poor Alberto, he doesn't know me at all, but I called him up and said, I've been carrying this around. I just want you to know how proud I am of you and Mr. Blattner. And, he said, well, are you calling to recruit me to Teach for America? I said, yes, in fact, I am, because I think you're going to make a better doctor if you come back and we can send you to Roma to be a teacher right there in Roma. So on behalf of Alberto and all of these teachers, some of whom are in the room that are working this hard, I want to thank you very much for having us today for this conversation.
Let me start by asking one question to all of the panel members. I want you to give us your greatest reward and the greatest challenge that you have realized when you came to this Nashville metropolitan area and in your school.
One of my greatest rewards so far from teaching in Nashville is being exposed to such fantastic kids who want to come to school every day to really do well for themselves. And I think that really helped me get started off on a pretty good start for myself and motivating myself to do everything that I can for them because they actually do want to be there for the most part every single day and want to figure out how they can get better and learn for themselves. However, on the opposite end of that, something that is still very challenging is having a classroom full of students that are on so many different levels and figuring out what are the best ways that I can attract to these students and help them get to the best level that they possibly can get to and help them learn all this information in one collective whole as a group. So that has certainly been something that is very difficult, but we're still working through each and every day as we go through.
I think that it's very overwhelming to see just how far these kids really are behind. I mean, you hear these stories, but when you put faces to it, understanding that that is real and putting faces to the statistics has proven to be very challenging. With that being said, I think that the greatest reward is certainly when you can take some of those students and change their lives, as has been the focus of today's talk by Stephen Farr. I've had students that came in. I had a student with an IEP who came in and was so far behind, told me he hated math, he was never going to do anything, had an attitude, and met with his parents. And since that time, he has received above an 80% on the past 2 unit tests. And I know that that might not seem substantial in 80%. That's a C still. But in how far he's come from what he could do coming into the classroom to now what he is doing on the Algebra 1 level has been absolutely amazing. And so just little stories like that that really keep you motivated when you're faced with over 100 students that don't want to do the work, you can find those small victories. And that's certainly the biggest reward for me.
I would echo Anthony's sentiments for the challenge. I think one of the biggest challenges of teaching is teaching a whole class of students who are on so many different levels. And just to give you a more concrete example, in my classroom, I have one student who's on a 10th grade reading level, and I have one student who's on a kindergarten reading level. That's in one class. And so you can read the same text, but both of them are not going to get the same thing out of it. So my challenge has been what's called differentiation, which is as hard to say as it is to do in the class. Providing instruction that is different for each student so that they can all learn. In terms of my rewards, I want to share with you a brief anecdote from my social studies class last week. We're doing the Civil War, and my students have to memorize the first line of the Gettysburg Address. So the line is, 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth to this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. So I modeled that for my students. 6 hands shot up. Mr. Tansey, don't you mean all men and women? Yes, you're absolutely right. When my students demonstrate critical thinking skills, not just regurgitating information, but really owning their own thought process and really getting to the gist of why we're in the classroom, thinking for themselves and demonstrating that they can really critically think through issues, explain why the Gettysburg Address is important, explain why equality is important. That's really the reward that's been for me in the class thus far.
I've found that my greatest challenge is just getting through my first year of teaching and getting through my second year of teaching. And I knew I always wanted to be a teacher, but it's still hard. And I've had that passion to be a teacher all my life, and it's still hard every day sometimes. And so witnessing my third grader who has so much trouble reading because he doesn't know the sight words, that he doesn't know how to say they because he doesn't understand how to put the letters together. But at the same time, seeing that exact same student get really excited about reading when he does know the words and when he's getting stronger, and just like the little ladybug, when his little person gets to climb a level because his reading level is growing. That's a real reward. And so in addition to that, just being able to develop as a teacher in Nashville has been very rewarding. I've been able to observe some really great teachers in this district, and I've been able to learn some really good strategies, and so that's been the greatest reward for me.
What do you think of our educational system? You've been here for a while. And what do you think we can do to develop teacher leadership in Nashville?
I think that leadership is a huge thing that is obviously necessary. It's what Teach for America looks for when they recruit great teachers, and I think that there are some structures in place, certainly in our district, and then there are some that should be evolved. And so I'm one of 94 teachers at my school. I'm in one of the biggest high schools in our district, and it can be really easy to get lost in the shuffle. And so with that being said, I think it's really important to put systems in place, especially within the larger schools, where you can develop relationships with other teachers, and in doing that, create accountability systems like critical friends and things where you are able to go into classrooms and really observe during your planning periods or during when you can observe other teachers and learn strategies, because when that accountability isn't there and when those opportunities aren't there, or you don't trust the teacher across the hall, it's going to be really difficult to take advantage of those.
I'm one of about 6 teachers at my school, so it's a little bit different end of the spectrum. So being a part of a brand new charter school, we could all really use a lot of exposure to kind of other things that are happening in other people's classrooms. Being the only social studies teacher at my school and being at my first year teaching, I don't really know what other social studies rooms look like, or how debates work very well in other classrooms, or how this might work. So really having more opportunities and more chances to go and observe these other teachers, and as Natalie said, while professional development can really give you those specific tools, seeing those things in action can really make the difference for you, because you can see how this is going to work and how you can adapt that to your students and to the different things that are happening in your classroom. So professional development, which we've experienced a bit from the district, has been phenomenal, but really taking it that one step further to being able to see these things in action would be certainly beneficial.
I think a more robust teacher mentorship program would be really, really helpful, especially for first-year teachers like Anthony and myself. We really benefit from talking to 09 core members who've gone through a first year. They know the challenges, they know the stories, and it's been really helpful to talk to them. But just to have someone who is set aside to be your mentor say, this is what I've gone through, these are some things that you should look out for during your first year, and to have that regular contact throughout the year, I think would be really, really helpful in terms of managing a class, designing good instruction, coming up with a curriculum, even just good ideas for classroom engagement. I think some type of program where you can identify who the really, really effective teachers are and have them serve as leaders for first-year teachers who are still kind of learning the ropes.
I've been really excited in the last 2 years, and especially this year, to see the developments that MMPS is making in using the data and the student data that's available through TVAS. And as my third graders it's their first year to take ThinkLink, and it's the first year that it really counts. It's been really helpful for me to be able to use that data. And so Teach for America has provided me with the tools and the strategies to really look at the data, figure out what it means, and to figure out what the meaning of the data should lead to in my classroom and my development as a teacher. And so one thing that I think Metro would benefit from is more of a structure and a tool for using data.
Thank you. Let's open it up to questions from people in the audience.
I'm curious, through the whole Teach for America community, if you've had an experience where core teachers have been successful infecting other potential core teachers, or core teachers recruiting other teachers into Teach for America.
Let me answer this in a couple of ways. I don't know if this is true of you here, but once we get people in the system, we use them to get more people in the system, right? So I imagine that we've been asking these folks, who are your friends back in college who were such great leaders that we need to give them a call? And that is happening, and they are talking to their friends. And, let's be clear, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? I think what we need people to do is understand from people who are doing it how hard this is, because we don't want you to apply if you think this is going to be easy. And I think our best ambassadors are those people who are doing it, for sure. Slightly broader question is, what are the effects that a dramatically effective teacher can have on a campus more broadly? And that varies very much, but our mantra with our teachers is, you have to earn your influence. You go in, you are not coming to this school to change the school. You are coming to this classroom to change your kids' lives. And here's what will happen. If you do that, you will be asked to take more responsibility across the school. But it's got to start in your room. We have the disaster stories of a core member coming in thinking, I'm going to change everything here, right? That doesn't work. We have to earn our credibility, and our credibility is about how well our students do.
What can Metro Schools do to keep you past your 2 years?
For myself, being only now 3 months into my commitment, I'm not quite sure what 2012 looks like yet, but I do know just after these past 3 months, I do have an interest in education. So whether it be something where the district maybe creates some type of program to where they are helping teachers figure out next paths in education in the city, something that I can be more exposed to, and being able to meet more people who are involved with the education movement here in Nashville, that might ultimately change how I feel about staying here past 2012, or how I feel about staying in my classroom, or how I feel about helping other means of education within our city. So I think that would be something really excellent, to be able to connect with people in our district who are going to help me figure out what could be some great next steps for my life, and does that include being here still in Nashville?
Through these 2 years, I've realized that there is a possibility I would leave the classroom, but that would be for school leadership. And so one thing that would really, I think, get me excited about staying in Nashville would be some sort of program to connect me with effective school leaders that are already here, or to kind of provide me with some of the strategies that effective administrators already have.
I will speak to that because I was not an education major in undergrad, and education was always an interest of mine, but I am planning on staying in MNPS for at least a third year and maybe beyond that. And so with that being said, I think that speaks to my positive experience I've had, and I'm not saying it's been an easy one, but it's certainly been one where I have seen a lot of growth and change and willingness to grow, and I think that's so key. I've taken on some leadership at my school this year, and I've been able to just talk to other teachers and really talk about best practices and just things that I think are easily overlooked, but through those experiences, I've realized how important education is to me, and I want to be in the classroom making that difference rather than, a few steps out for a while, because I think that's where I'm really going to learn and grow.
But one thing that I will say about TFA is that it exposes, especially college undergrads, to the issue of educational inequity. A lot of people go throughout college maybe they had gone to very, very good schools and really weren't familiar with this issue. And what Teach for America does a great job of is they make this issue visible, and they really help people develop a passion for fighting it. And so when I got into contact with TFA and was ultimately accepted, I really developed a passion for this cause and developing strategies to solve it. So whether I'm in the classroom in 2 years, I may be, depends on how my kids behave on most days, but even if I'm not, this is some issue that I will stick with, whether that's policy or law or what have you.
On a broader scale, can you speak to that question of how you are interacting with teacher training universities? And it's kind of the question that the charter school operators always get. What have you shared with the people who are operating already?
My mother is a professor at a school of education, and for me, the battle lines is just dinner, right? But I mean, here's my honest take. We depend on our university partners, right? Lipscomb is here helping us get the success that we're getting. So honestly, you're right. There are people in academia and schools of education that resent Teach for America for various reasons. I know it sounds naive, but I just don't get it. The problem is too big. There are too many challenges. We need not only Teach for America, we need 100 other paths to education that are getting great people to be successful. And frankly, I don't care where they come from. I mean, School of Education or Teach for America or Alternative Certification Program, to my mind, we need an era of innovation on all of those fronts. And all of us need to take responsibility for how effective the people are that are leaving our door after they go into the classroom. And you know, I am optimistic about this because there are a lot of programs. I know Lipscomb's been very innovative. There are a lot of programs that are thinking like that. You know, we're not producing teachers and sending them off. We're producing effective teachers, so we have to know how they do after they leave. We have to see who's most successful, go back and understand how did we select those people? What courses did they take? What actually made a difference for kids, and change to do more of that? And I feel like we're on the front end of something very exciting there, and that these divisions are, in fact, breaking down.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank the panelists.